morning. We're back again for another edition of the Astro Weather. It is me and the little Astro Weather kitty, Peaches. Peaches, the Astro Weather kitty. There she is, getting her weather groove on. What's happening, everybody? Oh, man. Steered, I buried my 20-year-old cat this morning. A fantastic innings. Nature is glorious, remains undefeated. 20 years, man. That's a good run. That is a good run. 20 years. Wow. Wow. Did you hear that, Peaches? 20 years. You have a lot to live up to. A lot to live up to. I think Jones' cat is about 17. And old Jasper coming in on 14. So, yeah, it's tough when we say goodbye to our friends. It doesn't matter if they're two-leggeds or four-leggeds, but they give us so much joy, and they're so unconditional, right? You're just a little unconditional tart, aren't you? Although I'm not sure you're that unconditional. The jury's still out on that. All right, let's do a quick little rundown. See who's in his house. KZ Gypsy Muse, who is pretty active over on locals. Appreciate your input, KZ. Greetings here. There he is, the man, DJ MC, Michael Sisternino. Kabuki Theater, hey, Bo. Hey, Bo. Good to see you. Charlie checking in with a little Johnny Nash. I can see clearly now. That was, I think that was the second kind of reggae hit that became a little bit of a sensation. The first was the song "The Israelites." I remember listening to the Israelites when I was about 8 or 9 years old, maybe even younger than that. And it was like one of those one-hit wonder kind of things that you would hear on AM radio. Everybody was like, what is this? Wake up in the morning, eat breakfast, every night. Oh, the Israelites now. Looking back on it, it's like, man, that was a real kind of reggae ska classic. The most convincing Jamaican accent ever since Jar Jar Binks. Are we talking about Kamala? Fuck, she's weird. She's weird. Buffalo's SF Super Bowl in New Orleans. That would be hot, man. That would be a good Super Bowl. There's my man, Jeff Rosen. He's back. Scott Jerzik's here. Hi, Scott. Janice in Oklahoma. The Wildcat. Kelly B. and Sue Leinert. Hi, Sue. Greetings from down under. Jackie Lorio. Road Trip 1981. You know, that's Darlene. Always good to see her. Mary Lee in the house. Erica Emoti. And there she is, the lovely and talented one. Sabine Austin, one tooth at a time. Christina Jerzik reporting in from Ohio. It is rainy and cold. We could use a little of that here. We've been frying our asses off. Southwest Virginia, our gal Orlando, the Queen of Scream with her coffee. Check it in. Laura E, 38, and rainy in Vermont. Still a beautiful color show. There we go. Mr. Gray No More is here, and Deborah Wheeler. There's some connections in there happening. Harry Bowie, hey, Night's Light, Whimsical Farm Girl. What's going on, Lori? Stilt Traveler, T. Jordan, Tom, my man in the house. The Noga Movement, Moonsprout, M. We got a great crew today. Sharon Lewis. Platinum Happiness. There's our gal, Janet. who cut up a rug at the event this year. Wow. I think they may have had to replace part of it because there were sparks. It was like a smoldering kind of like quality down there in the carpet. PMSO, what's going on, Janine? My man Peter Bio. What's going on, brother? Good to see you. Had a good conversation with Peter last night. Let's see. Elizabeth Donald's here. Hi, Elizabeth. And Maria P. Ferrer. All right. Got to get a few greetings in here at the start of the day. It's essential. It's essential for my human experience. And yours as well. All right. I think enough forces have gathered, which means it's time for the weather. Let's get into the weather. Let me zoom in a little bit before we... I think that'll work a little more. Try to make this a slightly bigger, just a tad bigger. There we go. And let's do this. There it is. All righty. Talk about the weather. Oh, ouch. We still have the grand old cross here. Look at this. This is the day we were talking about. The sun at 22, Mars at 22. We got a Sun-Mars square right there, ladies and gentlemen. Cardinal style. The sun coming in right here and moving into that square with Pluto. It's going to get hot up in here. And then we have the sun in opposition with Chiron, which we saw yesterday. Exact, but today, just a degree off. Making a pretty intense Grand Cross. If you thought last week's Grand Cross with the moon playing the stand-in role for Pluto was something, well, today you got another thing coming. This is hot. This is heavy. Conflict, frustration. We're starting to reach a bit of a boiling point here. I think the boiling point is probably that Sun-Pluto square about 7 days from now. Well, the sun will still be in square with Mars in a wide opposition with Chiron. So we're just really getting into this. 7 days from now puts us into the 23rd of October and launches us into the month of Scorpio and the underworld. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's about to get hot and heavy up in here. You know, we talk about the little known burning path, also known as the Via Combusta or the Via Combusta. And it is a concept that is fairly old, and it tracks the movement of the sun between the 23rd and the, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the 12th, 13th degree of Scorpio. 23rd of Libra to the 12th, 13th of Scorpio. And those planets are on what's called the burning path, meaning that they are going to receive intense heat by degree. It is a melting down of the dross of the personality. So one of the things that as a kind of a wider application of this is on a social level, and this is very different this year. I mean, well, let's wind it back. Well, it is different because we had the sun, obviously, at somewhere in this degree area, and particularly the year before, 2022, when Pluto was at those final degrees of Capricorn, and that was hot and heavy. But we did not have Mars in the conversation at that point in time. So we're in a pretty intense crucible here. I think socially, because Libra has a lot to do with obviously judgments and contracts. I think socially we're going to see some mains burst. Keep your eye on some of the court cases with Trump. Some of them may not stick. Some of these judgments with Trump may not stick. At the same time, there may be newer cases or newer accusations that pop up, even though it's very late in the game, obviously. Yeah, so the image I have here just in my brain is like pipes bursting. That's the image, pipes bursting. And I don't think anybody has to be too concerned about that happening right now because obviously weather-wise, we're not into that territory, but that's what it feels like. Pipes bursting. Kind of brains exploding. I mean, that's another image that I have of this. And we're going to start to see some things over the course of the next week that are going to be, I think, rather difficult for people to unsee. You know, we've been talking a little bit about Tim Waltz, which we'll cover over on 15 Minutes today. And the accusations of these students who is accusing Tim Waltz of grooming and drugging him are now starting to get real because this person has said they were going to come forward. Not only that, but Waltz has identifying marks on the body, which only someone who had seen him naked would know, one of which is a Chinese tattoo. Does that surprise you at all? The Chinese tattoo part. We're also dealing with more and more things coming out on the Diddy side. And so all these things now are being kind of unearthed. I mean, it's that Sun-Mars square, the Mars-Pluto opposition. And I would say that there would be people kind of in this arena or in this, we'll use the word area code, that they would be on suicide watch. This is kind of a suicide watch moment. And I'm not talking about you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. I'm talking about out there in the world. This is the mounting of a social pressure. And it's not just the Waltz Diddy world. The social pressure in general is mounting here. Mounting and Diddy is not a word you probably want to use in the same sentence, by the way. But the social pressure is mounting. Again, the feeling here is like pipes bursting. Like how much pressure can we take coming in from external sources? On the personal side, this part of the T-square is very, very intense. There's not a hell of a lot of patience in the world. We still have the Grand Trine going on, which is really interesting. Mars at 22, Venus at 27, Neptune at 20. It's like Neptune has slipped back into 29. So Neptune is 27. That's the part of fortune at 20. So Neptune's at 27. So we have this other energy, which again we've talked about. This is the escape route, and it's forming a beautiful kite pattern today. Look at that beautiful kite pattern. So let's talk about how we use the Mars energy in Cancer. Mars in Cancer comes in bursts. It is not always straightforward. It's not on all the time. Mars in Cancer pulses. It's on, it's off, it's on, it's off, it's on, it's off. But in this configuration, clearly it is more on. Even when it is stressed, by the social conditioning or the social conditions of the Sun Mars square. So I do think that there is a high degree of relatability. Mars Neptune trines tend to be very creative. The Venus Mars trine can be co-creative. Venus Neptune trine, empathic. So some really, really interesting, complex configuration today. It's almost as if we have to ask ourselves the question, what world do we want to be in? Do you want to be in a world of flow and cooperation and co-creation and not sweating the small stuff? Because that's really what this grand trine is about, is not sweating the small stuff. Or do you want to be in a world where you have to really fight? And I mean fight for what's right, fight for fight for the underdog. This is real underdog energy. This Sun 22, Mars 22, it's real underdog. So are the two mutually exclusive? It's a good question. When I was a kid, and this is how most kids were, if you got into a fight, you'd be brought into the principal's office. He'd talk to you and make you shake hands, and then you become friends. What a unique concept. The problem is that not everybody gets into fights and shakes hands and learns how to become friends. It's a very early form of conflict resolution. So this T square, and we haven't even gotten into Chiron, by the way, this T square is not necessarily independent of the Grand Trine. So you can, if you need to or have to, be engaged in a mode of conflict. Now, do you have to be in it till death do you part? With that Sun-Pluto square, we might see that as the days tick off here. But the Grand Trine represents the ability to resolve those conflicts, so they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. I mean, that's the one thing that I think most people should take into consideration anyway. I mean, it's only been really over the last, let's say, 12 years that we become so polarized that nobody ever really thinks, well, I can resolve this conflict. We're just going to go into our own separate corners and that's it, right? Well, today, this energy is on the table, and it will be for a while. Venus will probably be tracking Mars. Mars moves at its own rate. So this Grand Trine really is still something in water. So fascinating. I mean, again, you can engage in this conflict right here, mostly here, right? And then you can resolve it, or you can skip the conflict altogether. You don't necessarily have to go there. It depends. It depends on kind of what's going on with you and where you are. But if you do get engaged in this conflict, right? If you can't, and again, these squares with Pluto are deeply transformational. I mean, this is one of those, there are times in our lives where we have these life lessons where if we can really transform those life lessons, it lessens, it's interesting, lesson and then lesson. It lessens the need to have to go through that again at such an intense level. I think you might understand what I'm saying here. Boy, this is just so much energy today. Just a ton of energy. When we get into these T squares, they are energetic. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a lot of heat. There's a lot of passion. There's a lot of intensity, right? But there's also this kind of cooling aspect at the same time. If this were Chinese medicine, we'd have heat and cooling almost at the same time. And it's beautiful because we also have another kite pattern over here, right? So we have two interlocking kite patterns today, right here with the Grand Trine. Pluto coming in and sextiling Venus. Look at that. This is loyalty. This is devotion right here. And then on the other side, we have another kite pattern because we have the Grand Trine and it's leaning this way. And it is the Mars-Uranus sextile, right? So there's so much energy today. There's so many different, like this today's one of those days where it's almost like you have all these different choices ahead of you, and you can go down this path or this path or this path or this path. And they're not simply mutually exclusive. Like one of those choices can lead you back to another one of these paths. Really interesting day. Super, super interesting day. And I didn't even really get into this Sun-Jupiter trine, which has been going on for a while now. But we have the Sun-Jupiter trine, which expands everything. And in Gemini, what are we always talking about here? We're always talking about communication. So retrograde here is communication coming back from the past. And things that have been said in the past that, again, I think are more easily resolved because of what's going on today. This is really fascinating. We've got the moon in Pisces, and it's separating from Saturn and moving closer to Neptune. So the emotional body is much more fluid, and there's less boundaries around everything. And oh, look, what do we have here? The moon's coming in, and it is part of the Grand Trine. Look at that. So all you creative people out there, you better jump on this. This is a really great creative aspect. Like, let your inspiration flow here. Let your inspiration flow. This is such a fascinating day. So many interesting opportunities and angles. Venus opposing Uranus. You know, those chance meetings that are in the air that somehow seem fated are still in the mix, right? Mars squaring Chiron. This is interesting. Usually with Mars and a Chiron square, especially with Chiron and Aries, it's one of those squares where you have to. I mean, there is an expression of what we would call masculine energy, but it's through the feminine because Cancer is feminine, and it's very, very protective. It defends its turf, and Chiron squaring Mars will bring up sort of this somewhat slightly reasonable doubt, like, well, can I do that? Can I hold my ground? Can I safely protect the people and the things that are important to me? It's one of those squares where there's some doubt, right? But don't doubt too long. Don't doubt too much, because there's so much going on with Mars today that I think is really great. And that sextile with Uranus is finding other ways to do things. You know, step outside the box. Step outside the kind of the normal way that you would marshal your energy, just in general. Because with this sextile, and it's going to get, you know, a little bit more pronounced here. Mars is going to go into Leo at 6 degrees, as we saw on Sunday night, then it retrogrades. So, you know, it's still marching forward and still connecting in with that sex. This is really interesting. There's so many possibilities. So many. So if you can, here, let's round this off a little bit. If you can melt down the conflict and the tension that is on the surface, because there's a lot of conflict and tension on the surface. If you can melt that down and then go about 2 layers deeper and really allow your, what I would call your feeling body, to let you navigate through the world, boy, you can have some tremendous movement, action, opportunity. I'll use the word grace. We'll throw the G word in there. But it feels like you have to kind of get through at least this gate right here, right? This T square. And then the Sun Chiron opposition is quite interesting. I mean, it feels to me like that's an opposition where people are trying to really prove themselves. If you're in relationship, I think this is interesting energy. It's like, again, it's like, why sweat the small stuff? Because the small stuff under this T square can get much, much bigger. Much, much bigger. I mean, this is way more interesting in going with this flow, 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 flow here. You've got the moon coming in sextile Uranus. Reminds me of the In Excess on New Sensation. It's a really interesting day. Really, really, really interesting day. Early on, we've got the sun moon in conjunct. And later on, as the day or the evening progresses, as you're going through it, the in conjunct will start to widen out. But again, it's interesting because Libra and Pisces are very, they have this interesting connection through the planet Venus. And again, we're looking at some degree of conflict resolution. I would say, I know it's one of these things that sounds kind of corny, but today is one of those days where if you're in a position to forgive somebody, do it, even if it's like in a traffic situation. Because the one thing I mean, again, if you move into conflict, resolve it as quickly as possible, right? And then find a way to move into this really interesting area of flow. Water, 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 a little bit of earth there. I would say from the big picture, we live in a world where it's become so polarized and so conflicted that most actors, characters, and events you'll see today will be engaged, in the world, right? The world actors or the world characters, whoever they are. Like you will see them engaged in conflict. Right? You'll see them engaged in conflict. I've been reading some things about Ukraine, and they're starting to talk about like a ceasefire in Ukraine. And if there's any conditions that they would have some kind of a ceasefire or some kind of negotiated truce, it would be under these conditions. It would be the end of the intense conflict and coming into more of a situation of flow. Now, if you're in the Harris camp, boy, that's what you want, right? You want to have the ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. You want that on your dance card before you get elected. And I think that's a possibility. That's clearly a possibility. Okay, well, there you go. Wow, look at that. Well, I got another chart for our True Hemp Science Star of the Day that kind of resembles this chart and all the activity, all the potentiality. This is one of the next few days. Let's just extend this out to, let's go into Friday. These next days are like living multiple days in one day. There's so much potential for activity and resolution and activity challenge resolution. It's almost like a blur, and we tend to think about time as these very linear chunks, but this is not a linear chunk time week. This is one of those weeks where you can literally almost live a lifetime in about 4 to 5 days because there's so much going on, right? I mean, what we're looking at here is really embracing a lot of it's almost the breadth of the human experience. I just really dig these interlocking kite patterns. Look at that right there, and then right there. Beautiful stuff. When you see something like this, the potential for novelty and complexity is really rich. Like this is the human drama we're looking at here. the human drama as in all of its hubris and pride and empathy, compassion, creative and redemptive glory. It's going to be a very interesting week. It already started off as a very interesting week yesterday. It's going to be a very interesting week. This feels like one of those weeks that's historic in a lot of ways. Because that sun in 7 days, 8 days moves into Scorpio, and we're in a very different territory, right? We're kind of at the precipice of this, sort of bending of the light. And it's going to be very interesting, an interesting week. Because again, 8 days from now, we're in the underworld, and we are locked in on this fucking election. So anything that is going to happen, that is going to be intense, fractious, debatable, it's going to happen. And I really feel like the next 7 days are where it's at. So from today, Tuesday, to next Tuesday, where we have the height of that Sun-Pluto square, 2929, and then that sun drops into Scorpio when we're in a different zone. So high tension, and high release. It's all part of it. All right. Let's get into our True Hemp Science Star of the Day. Our True Hemp Science Star of the Day. Let me get the banner up. Here we go. All right. As you know, the True Hemp Science Star of the Day is brought to you by True Hemp Science, the sponsor, besides myself, Robert Phoenix, of the show. And here's a little, I always like to point this out. This is a little pouch where you get your Starlight gummy. You got 2 Starlight gummies in here per pack. You'll also get some of these nice little vials. This one is called Dose. You'll get some of that with your, maybe not Dose, but you'll get something similar, or you might get Dose. This depends on what Chris puts in the goodie bag. All you got to do is get $100 or more of these great organically sourced CBD products. Type in 15MINS, and you get like another little order of stuff along with your order. It's great. And $150 more gets you free shipping. There's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. And you can go to True Hemp Science and make an appointment and talk to Chris or his assistant and find out what CBD is the best for you. It's a full service, white label. All right, let's talk about our THS Star of the Day, Mr. Lee Iacocca. And Iacocca is one of the more important figures of the 20th century for a number of reasons. First of all, he is at the forefront of the automobile revolution of the 1960s. He's leaning on the Mustang because guess what? That is Lee Iacocca's baby. He came up with the idea of the Mustang. Lee Iacocca was in love with cars. He grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And the rumor has it that he's the only person that ever went from a tricycle to a car. Well, he's probably not the only one, although it's a very interesting rumor, or at least story. A folk tale that somebody like Lee Iacocca could build a career on. And his name is tied to the rise of Ford in the 1960s. And one of the things that Iacocca starts out, he's interesting. He starts out as an engineer And he wants to make cars because he loves cars so much. But then he gets into sales. And this is where his real gift and talent lies, is in sales. And I don't think we've ever really done, well, maybe we have on one of the other shows, but Libra is a sign that is probably the best sign for sales. Period. End of story. Sales and PR, those sales, PR, and then law are the three areas in which Libra really excels. They can be good at design and they can be good at graphics and art and things that are creative in nature, but they're the best salespeople. Why are Libras the best salespeople? Because they're able to find language that is relatable to other people. And they usually come across as being fair and balanced and kind, which is, in a salesperson, it's kind of what you want, right? You want somebody who's, if you're trying to sell you something, they they may as well, in some ways be, harmonious, pleasant. Because you get further with honey than vinegar, as they say, right? So Libra's really good at that. Very, very good at sales. And this is where Iacocca makes his mark, is in the sales world. And he's got that sun, and this is client-based right here. This is like, hey, man, here's Lee Iacocca and the client's over here. You want to buy something? Sure, Lee. What do you got? Well, I got this car called the Mustang. I love it. I love it. Let's buy it. And he has Mars in Aquarius. So he's always looking for something new, right? Iacocca is an innovator. And it's funny how when he was at Ford, Henry Ford II was in charge. And some of the things that Henry Ford II kind of leveled against his father are the same things that Lee Iacocca leveled against Henry Ford II. Because Henry Ford, when he was creating cars, he was all about the Model T and then the Model A, and they were they all looked the same. They all looked the same. It was like every car was vanilla or chocolate. That was it. And Henry Ford II comes in and says, hey, Dad, people like variety. People like things that are not just black. They're like other colors. And so by the time he gets to Ford, Henry Ford II has kind of morphed into the old man. And Iacocca is there. And, he really shows up around 1960. So he's, let's see, 26 years old, right? 26 years old in 1960. He's 40. No, he's 36. And he's like, hey, let's give kids cars that they like. The youth market is huge. We got a huge youth market. Let's start making cars for young people. Hello, there's his true node in Leo in the 5th house. Children, youth. And with Neptune here, it's inspiring him, right? It's not just, hey, let's sell cars to young people. It's let's find the style. Let's find the style for those young people. So Iacocca is motivated by the aesthetics and by the social vibe of creating these cars. He's a really interesting character. Self-made guy, basically walks into Ford, nobody handed him anything. And you'll see this in his life as he has to go through these conflicts. And he goes through a lot of conflicts. So he becomes very, very popular, well-known, and he is a force to be reckoned with inside the auto industry because he's basically set Ford apart from all these other companies at that time. And of course, the Ford trucks were also quite good back in the day. And he's got this Jupiter-Neptune trine. So he's kind of a visionary, right? Iacocca is a visionary. And eventually what happens is that he kind of gets passed up at Ford, right? He's got that moon in Taurus down here too in the second house. So he's good at money. He's really good at money. But he also probably pisses people off along the way. And that Mars in Aquarius is like, okay, I can see the future. Let's move it. Let's go. Let's go with the future here. And so he'll get into conflicts with this Moon Mars square, especially if he was passionate about his ideas. And he was, right? Even though he was a Libra and pretty even tempered, like this is a guy that was passionate about his ideas. How could you not be passionate about the automobile industry with that true node in Leo in the 5th house and that trine with Neptune and Jupiter? So what happens to Iacocca is that he gets passed over, and Ford starts to bring in other members of the Ford family, and they wind up essentially neutralizing him and diminishing his role and capacity at Ford. And what's interesting here is Chiron in the 1st house. That, people who have Chiron in the 1st house have to be okay with being uncomfortable with themselves, right? If you're looking for acceptance and you have Chiron in the 1st house, you're not going to get it, right? What you'll get is you'll get a sense of, I'm okay in spite of the fact that people may not accept me. That's the lesson there, right? You're going to kind of be on display, warts and all. And you're going to show people, hey, ultimately, I'm okay. You're the one that's got the problem. You're the one that's projecting your wound onto me. And so with Iacocca here, it's all about Aries as well. So he ultimately has to get into this idea that he's on an island at times and that he has to continue to kind of, punch through the resistance and punch through the struggles that he encounters, because as an Aries rising, he's going to encounter them. And then I'm going to bring this other chart up here. Then he gets let go from Ford. And I'll show you what happens. So this is the actual day he gets let go at Ford. And it's Pluto. Like he has Pluto. This is on July 13th, 1978. Walks in, 8 a.m. Here you go, Lee. Here's your walking papers. So Pluto will play a huge role. Transiting Pluto will play a huge role in his life moving forward. And it terminates the contract and the relationship with Ford Motor Company. So he's got that sun at 22 Libra, and Pluto's here at 14. So what's going to happen with Lee Iacocca? He's going to eventually hook up with Chrysler, which is a state of shambles. And he becomes an agent of change and transformation. And he takes Chrysler from being really like when he took over Chrysler, they were almost bankrupt. And again, that's Aries rising, right? Aries rising is going to meet the challenge head on. Now he's probably got a nice little package here from Ford with this Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. Like that'll be helpful for him, right? But it's really this Pluto conjunction with the descendant. So it's the end or the death of that relationship. And then as Pluto moves forward, right, he's got his Mercury at 15, and we have Pluto right down here also at what sign? The degree of 14. So he's got a Pluto-Mercury conjunction. So Pluto is going to start to play this role in Lee Iacocca's life in many different areas. But we'll just take it from the top, and we're going to put him in the Chrysler category. And he is going to really channel that transformational energy and turned Chrysler into an automobile manufacturer that he brings back from the dead, right? That's the Pluto-Mercury-Pluto-Sun conjunction. And Iacocca he's the father of the minivan. This is what Chrysler becomes known for, is the minivan. And he literally reinvents the brand. And it's kind of an amazing success story. The thing that he focused on early on was this concept of the K car. And the K car will not go down in history as Chrysler's most aesthetically pleasing car. But Iacocca realized that one of the things that they needed to do is they needed to make a car that could be the basis and the foundation for other cars where the chassis were interchangeable. And it would be the bodies ultimately that would go through the bolting and unbolting process. And that's really what the K car was about, was to create a very functional, sturdy, workable car that would literally be the chassis for other cars that they would create moving forward. It was an idea about economization. Transiting Neptune's on his Jupiter, right? So he's going to be very inspired during this time, even though he's like, fuck, I could have been president of Ford Motor Company, right? And he gets passed over. He still is not down. He's looking for a new challenge, and he's going to be inspired. Now, there's another effect here, Pluto, that is not as good. And this is where Iacocca will ultimately suffer a series of major setbacks in marriage and relationship during this time when he's taking Chrysler, from the gutter and rebuilding the brand. Eventually, his wife dies. I think she dies of Parkinson's disease, like during this time. And then Iacocca goes through at least 3 marriages after that. And none of them really last much longer than a couple years at the most. So Pluto, it winds up really doing a number in his chart over here in the 7th house. So while he has that Plutonian energy and comes in, and it really becomes this really profound, transformational agent of change, right on the dot of his sun, he's also suffering setbacks in relationship, where he's going through that Pluto-Pluto square, which is ultimately not very easy for him, but he comes through it. And the thing about Iacocca that is fascinating is that he was really into what he was doing. I mean, all the way until the end of his life. I mean, this is a guy who, in the last years, he didn't pass away that long ago, but he was very into the concept of e-bikes. And he was working with Chinese companies to bring e-bikes into the United States of America. So you could actually give him 3 major wins in his lifetime, right? Creating the youth market, co-creating the youth market with Ford and the Mustang. And then, there's a trickle-down effect there. They've got Lincoln Mercury, and of course they have the Cougar, which is, not quite a youth car, but it's a step up. Like when you get married, what do? You go from the Mustang, you get the Cougar. And the Cougar, that was a hell of a nice looking car. So he basically he's in this area of trends, right? He hits the youth market with Ford. He gets into like the baby on board market with the minivan at Chrysler. And even after he leaves Chrysler, he's doing deals with these Chinese e-bike companies to bring. He's a fascinating character, and that's that Mars in Aquarius. It's always, kind of engaged in something new, right? And he's got this Mars conjunction with Pallas. But again, they're in different signs. He's got Mars at 28 Aqua, and he's got Pallas down here at 2 Pisces. So he can see the future, right, with Pallas. And Mars is the actionable planet in his chart. So it's a fascinating character. He's a fascinating character and fascinating chart. And again, even down here with Saturn opposing this Mars, right? This is the authority. This is the Ford family. It's like, Lee, you're fired. You're no longer here. We no longer need your services. And it's like, I'll show you. He has a book about all of this. And if you're interested in any of these principles and a very interesting life story, check out his book. He's nobody's perfect, but this guy is I think he's one of the great Americans, actually, because he shows people at a very fundamental level that you can't. He's like the epitome of the self-made man. Who knows? Maybe he's a fucking Mason or something, and he has some handshakes along the way. I don't know. I don't know that part about his life. But he's this self-made guy, and he rises to the top, and then he gets chopped down, and then he goes into this other place, which is really on its last legs, and goes in and transforms that and becomes a self-made man all over again. So if you're in that world and you like stories like that, go find his autobiography. It might be inspiring to you. Maybe we all need a little bit of that. There you go. There's your True Hemp Science star of the day, Mr. Lee Iacocca. And with that, we come to the end of today's weather report. And we'll be heading on over to Boxcast Rumble. The links are in the description of the show. So a few action items for you today. Hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It really helps the algorithm. You can hit the bell to be notified when these shows happen. And they do every Tuesday through Thursday at 8 a.m. You'll also be notified for the Friday forecast. And also, as well, you will be notified for Sunday Night Astro Live. If you feel like buying me a cup of coffee, you can do that as well, since this channel has been proudly demonetized since the 2010s. And if you're interested in hooking up for a reading, that is my stock and trade. In fact, I have 2 to do today. So you can do that as well over on my website, robertphoenix.com. All right, mods, thank you for all your help. Chataria, you're the best. Treat each other well and use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart, 2-step what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix, and you are you. Bye for now.